Alright, so the first thing we are going to be doing is looking at blending modes. Blending modes are not your average tool, and what I mean by that is you can't find them in your toolbar, you can't really find them up here from what I know. They are actually in your layers panel. So if you've ever been on your layers panel and you noticed this little drop down menu that says normal, this is actually your blending modes, and it says it right there when you hover over it. Set the blending mode for the layer. Um, so right now I only have one image, but I will kind of show you why when we're using blending modes we should always have at least two images on the Photoshop file. So I'm going to go through and you can kind of see that you're not really seeing much of a change as I go through these previews. It's either turning all white or it's not doing anything at all. So I am going to paste an image. I found this really beautiful picture of a waterfall that I thought might look a little bit nice, so I'm going to place it right in the middle, and there we have it. Looks great. So now that we have two images, we can really see what the blending modes can do for your double exposures. So, as we said before, a double exposure image is pretty much just two images on top of each other, overlaid in some way. Obviously, in the traditional sense, it's a little bit more cut and dry as to how the image is exposed together, but when you get into Photoshop, you have a lot more options, and those are all found in the blending mode. So when you look through your blending modes, you're going to notice that there's a bunch of different sections that you can kind of scroll through. And the first one is normal, which this is your default. Next is the darken blending modes, the lighten blending modes. These are the contrast blending modes. And these are the inversion blending modes. And then this last section right here is the component blending modes. So in the interest of doing a double exposure, I would suggest using either the darken blending modes, the lighten blending modes, or the contrast blending modes. Otherwise, you're probably not going to get what you're looking for. But who knows? You can really use whatever you want. These are just kind of my recommendations for this specific project. So one thing I want to point out is that when you compare the darken and the lighten blending modes, you can kind of see on each of these darken ones, the photo is transferring onto the lighter parts of this man's face. And then once you go down to the lighten blending modes, it's actually the complete opposite. So the image is occupying the space that is pretty much all black in the image, so all the shadows. And I think that I'm going to actually go with screen. I think I'm liking the lighten blending modes for this specific project. And this is just one example. Like I said, you guys are going to go through and you're going to choose what you think works the best. And I'm going to go through a couple different images just to show you the different examples of how you can use blending modes. Alright, so right now I have a new file where we have two different photos. So you may have seen this in the first video, but I have a picture of a woman wearing a mask and a bunch of COVID headlines for newspapers. So I thought that might make a cool effect. And I thought that it might be pretty cool if I put these headlines on top of this girl wearing a mask. And this is just a pretty good example of how some images work better with some blending modes. For example, you can see that when you start to go into this darken area, it pretty much totally subtracts the white from the image, which is creating a pretty cool effect. So you're pretty much only seeing the ink. And then obviously, as we discussed before, um, with the lighten blending mode, it's taking out all of the black. So you can see through those black areas. And then even when you go down here, you're getting a really cool effect where it's totally removing that white area and then it's inverting the image. And I think I'm kind of liking this. So I'm going to do that. But I think that it's a little bit intense. You're not really seeing the photo anymore. And that's fine because now what we can do is we can go right next to blending mode and change the opacity. And now it's a little bit more subtle. So that's a few ways that you can use blending modes for your double exposure magazine ad project. Make sure that when you're choosing your blending modes, you give yourself a chance to really explore and find the best option for you. Next, we're going to get into masks. So stay tuned.